The coffee shop clock showed 2:47 p.m., and Maya had been sitting in the same corner booth for over 3 hours. Her laptop screen glowed with another job rejection email, the 15th one this month. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to push away the familiar feeling of panic that had been her constant companion for the past 6 months. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. "Rent is 3 days late? Need payment by Friday or we'll have to discuss other options." Maya's stomach dropped. She already knew what those other options meant. She'd seen it happen to her neighbor 2 weeks ago, all their belongings on the sidewalk, a new lock on the door. She opened her banking app, even though she knew exactly what she'd see. The numbers stared back at her like a cruel joke. $4.73. $4.73. That's what 6 years of college and 3 years of marketing experience had gotten her. That's what remained after losing her job when the tech startup she worked for suddenly shut down, leaving 40 employees with just 2 weeks' notice and no severance pay. Maya remembered that day clearly. She'd walked into the office with her usual morning coffee, ready to present the new campaign she'd been working on for weeks. Instead, she found security guards at the door and her manager standing in the lobby with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," her manager had said. "The funding fell through. Today is everyone's last day." At first, Maya had been optimistic. She was good at her job, had great references, and figured she'd find something new within a month. But the job market had other plans. Every position had hundreds of applicants. Companies wanted someone with more experience or less experience, or different experience. Some wanted to pay half of what she'd been making. Others disappeared entirely after promising to call back. The unemployment benefits helped for a while, but they barely covered her rent, let alone food, utilities, and the endless expenses of job hunting. Interview clothes, printing resumes, gas money for driving to interviews, it all added up faster than she'd expected. She'd already sold her car and was taking the bus everywhere. Her nice work wardrobe had been reduced to one good interview outfit that she guarded like treasure. Maya looked around the small downtown coffee shop where she'd become a regular. Not because she could afford to be, but because they had free Wi-Fi and didn't mind if she sat for hours with just one small coffee. The owner, Mrs. Chun, had even started giving her free refills when she thought no one was looking. Maya pretended not to notice these small acts of kindness, too proud to acknowledge them but too grateful to stop accepting them. Her laptop screen showed her email inbox, filled with automated rejections and a few messages from friends who'd stopped asking how the job search was going. She clicked on tomorrow's calendar appointment. Final interview, Hartwell Industries, 10 a.m. This was it. Her last scheduled interview. She'd applied to dozens of other companies, but this was the only one left that hadn't already rejected. The interview tomorrow wasn't just important, it was everything. If she didn't get this job, she'd have to move back in with her parents in their small town 3 hours away. There was nothing wrong with her hometown, but going back felt like admitting defeat. She'd worked so hard to build a life in the city, to prove she could make it on her own. Maya opened her research notes about Hartwell Industries. She'd spent hours learning everything she could about the company. They made eco-friendly packaging for restaurants and grocery stores. The CEO had started the company after watching a documentary about ocean pollution. They had won awards for their workplace culture and community involvement. It seemed like the perfect place to work, which made the pressure even worse. She'd practiced her interview answers until she could recite them in her sleep. She'd researched everyone she might meet, studied their products, and even visited some of their client restaurants to see their packaging in action. She'd done everything possible to prepare, except for one problem. She looked tired and stressed. Because she was tired and stressed, the last few months had taken their toll. She'd lost weight because she couldn't afford to eat much. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. She had dark circles under her eyes from staying up late applying for jobs and worrying about money. She tried to cover it with makeup, but there was only so much concealer could hide. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her credit card company, reminding her that her minimum payment was due. She'd already called them twice to explain her situation and ask for help. They'd been understanding but firm. She needed to make at least the minimum payment to avoid late fees and damage to her credit score. Maya calculated quickly in her head. She had $4.73 in her checking account. The bus fare to tomorrow's interview would cost $3.50 round trip. That would leave her with $1.23 until what? Until she hopefully got the job and received her first paycheck in 6 weeks? The math was depressing. She thought about calling her parents and asking for help. They'd offered many times, but Maya knew they didn't have much to spare. Her dad worked at the local factory and her mom cleaned houses. They'd already helped her when she'd first lost her job, sending her $500 they probably couldn't afford. She couldn't ask them for more. Her best friend Lisa had also offered to lend her money, but Lisa was just starting her own business and barely getting by herself. Maya had too much pride to keep borrowing from people when she had no idea when she'd be able to pay them back. The coffee shop was starting to fill up with the after-work crowd. People in business suits ordered expensive drinks without checking their bank accounts first. Maya watched them with a mixture of envy and hope. Tomorrow, maybe she'd be one of them again. Maybe she'd walk into a coffee shop and order whatever she wanted without counting every dollar. She closed her laptop and gathered her things. Tomorrow's interview was at 10 a.m., which meant she needed to catch the 9:15 bus to arrive on time. She'd already laid out her interview outfit, a navy blue suit she'd bought for her first job interview 3 years ago. It was a little loose now, but it was still professional. She'd ironed it carefully and hung it up where she could see it. A reminder of tomorrow's possibility. Maya stood up from the booth she'd claimed as her temporary office. Mrs. Chun waved from behind the counter, and Maya waved back. She'd miss this place if she had to move back home. She'd miss the city, her tiny apartment, and the life she'd built here, even if it was currently falling apart. As she walked toward the door, Maya made herself a promise. Tomorrow's interview would go well. It had to. She'd prepared too much and come too far to fail now. This job at Hartwell Industries wasn't just a paycheck. It was her chance to rebuild. To prove to herself that she could overcome this difficult time. She had one more night to worry, one more night to practice her answers, and one more chance to change everything. Maya pushed open the coffee shop door and stepped into the afternoon sunshine, holding on to hope with the same determination that had kept her going for the past 6 months. Maya packed her laptop into her worn backpack, the same one she'd carried through college. Tomorrow was the big day, and she needed to get home to prepare. As she zipped up the bag, she noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Whether from nerves, hunger, or too much caffeine, she couldn't tell. Probably all 3. She walked toward the coffee shop counter to throw away her empty cup. The afternoon rush was in full swing now, with a line of customers stretching almost to the door. Business people checked their phones impatiently. College students chatted loudly, and a few other laptop workers like herself packed up their temporary offices. Maya got in line behind an older gentleman who was fumbling through a leather briefcase. He looked professional but tired, wearing a wrinkled gray suit that suggested he'd been traveling. His silver hair was slightly messy, and he kept patting his jacket pockets like he was looking for something. When he reached the counter, the young cashier smiled brightly. "What can I get for you today?" "Just a turkey sandwich and a large coffee, Black," the man said, his voice carrying a slight tremor of exhaustion. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a wallet, then froze. Maya could see his face change as he opened it and looked inside. "That'll be $8.75, the cashier said cheerfully. The man pulled out a credit card and handed it over. Maya watched as the cashier swiped it, waited, then frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, but this card is being declined. Do you have another form of payment?" The man's face flushed red. "That's impossible. Can you try it again?" The cashier tried once more, shaking her head apologetically. "I'm sorry, it's still not going through." Maya could see the man's embarrassment growing as he searched through his wallet more frantically. He pulled out another card. "Try this one." The same thing happened. Declined. "I don't understand," the man muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "I just used this yesterday." The line behind him was getting longer, and Maya could feel the impatience building. Someone behind her sighed loudly. Another person checked their watch with obvious annoyance. The man seemed to shrink under the attention, his shoulders hunching forward. "Sir, I'm really sorry, but without payment I can't process your order," the cashier said quietly, trying to be kind but firm. "Maybe you could call your bank?" "My phone was stolen this morning along with my wallet," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I had these cards memorized correctly when I canceled the others, but apparently—" He trailed off, staring at the sandwich that had already been made and wrapped, sitting just out of reach on the counter. Maya could see the defeat in his posture. She recognized it because she'd felt it herself so many times lately, that moment when the world seemed determined to knock you down just when you needed to stay standing. I'll figure something else out," the man said, starting to step away from the counter. Maya found herself moving before she'd made a conscious decision. "Wait," she called out, reaching into her pocket. "I'll pay for his order." "Both." The cashier and the older man turned to look at her in surprise. The man's eyes widened. "Oh no, you don't need to do that." "It's okay," Maya said, pulling out her $5 bill, one of her last two bills. "We all have rough days." "Miss, that's very kind, but I couldn't possibly, really—" "It's fine," Maya interrupted gently, handing the money to the cashier, along with some coins from her pocket. "Sometimes we all need a little help." The cashier took the money and handed over the sandwich and coffee. The man stood there for a moment, seemingly at a loss for words. Maya could see genuine gratitude in his eyes, mixed with the kind of surprise people get when a stranger does something unexpectedly kind. "Thank you," he said finally. "This is incredibly generous of you. I'm Robert, by the way." "Maya," she replied with a smile. "And it's not a big deal, really. Would you mind if I bought you a coffee to thank you? I mean, once I get this card situation sorted out with my bank." Maya was about to decline. She couldn't afford to sit around much longer, but something in his expression made her pause. He looked lonely, the kind of lonely that comes from being far from home and having everything go wrong at once. "Actually, I already had my coffee for the day," she said, then gestured toward an empty table near the window. "But we could sit for a few minutes if you want." "You look like you've had quite a day." Robert's face brightened considerably. "I'd like that very much." They found seats by the large front window. Robert unwrapped his sandwich carefully as if it were something precious. "I can't tell you how much this means to me," he said. "I haven't eaten since breakfast, and that was at 5 a.m. "Traveling for work?" Maya asked. "Yes, though not by choice today. I was supposed to fly home this morning, but my flight got canceled due to weather. Then, when I was trying to get a taxi to the hotel, someone bumped into me on the subway platform and made off with my wallet and phone. Took me 2 hours just to find a place that would let me use their phone to call my office." Maya winced sympathetically. "That's awful. Did you file a police report?" "Tried to, but without ID it was complicated." Robert took a sip of his coffee and sighed with relief. "My assistant is supposed to wire me some emergency cash, but the earliest pickup time isn't until tomorrow morning. So here I am, stranded in a city where I don't know anyone, unable to pay for anything." "That sounds like something out of a nightmare," Maya said. "Where's home for you?" "About an hour north of here. I have meetings in the city pretty regularly, but I usually drive. Flying was supposed to save time." Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So much for that plan." Maya found herself genuinely curious about this man. Despite his obvious stress and embarrassment, he seemed kind and thoughtful. "What kind of work do you do?" "I run a company that makes packaging materials. Specifically, we focus on environmentally friendly options for restaurants and grocery stores." Robert's voice took on a different tone when he talked about his work, more confident, more passionate. "It's not the most exciting business to most people, but I believe it makes a difference." "Actually, that sounds really interesting," Maya said, and she meant it. "I've been thinking a lot about environmental issues lately. It seems like packaging waste is such a huge problem." Robert's eyes lit up. "Exactly. Most people don't realize How much of what ends up in landfills and oceans comes from food packaging? We're trying to change that, one restaurant at a time. They talked for several more minutes about environmental issues, business challenges, and the frustrations of travel. Maya found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Robert was easy to talk to, asking thoughtful questions and listening carefully to her answers. "So what brings you to the city?" Robert asked eventually. "Job hunting," Maya admitted. "I actually have an interview tomorrow morning that I'm really hoping goes well." "What kind of position?" "Marketing coordinator at a company called Hartwell Industries. They make eco-friendly packaging materials, actually. Kind of similar to what you do." Robert's eyebrows shot up with interest. "Hartwell Industries? That's a fantastic company. I've heard wonderful things about their work culture and their commitment to sustainability." "Really? That makes me feel a bit better about tomorrow. I've been so nervous." "Don't be nervous. If you're half as thoughtful and kind in your interview as you've been with me today, I'm sure you'll do wonderfully." Maya felt a warm glow at the compliment. It had been so long since anyone had said anything encouraging about her prospects. "Thank you. That really means a lot." Robert took another bite of his sandwich and leaned back in his chair, looking more relaxed than he had since Maya first noticed him at the counter. "You know, this might sound strange, but talking with you has been the best part of my entire week." Maya smiled, surprised by how comfortable she felt with this stranger. "It doesn't sound strange at all. Sometimes the worst days lead to the most unexpected moments." "Exactly." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I've been so focused on meetings and deadlines lately that I forgot how nice it is to just have a real conversation with someone. My wife always tells me I work too much." "How long have you been married?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. 32 years next month. Helen is the reason I started my company, actually. She's the one who first made me think about how much waste we create just from our daily habits. Robert's face softened when he talked about his wife. She started composting and recycling everything before it was trendy. I used to tease her about washing out every container, but she was right. Maya found herself leaning forward, drawn into the story. "How did that lead to starting a business?" "Well, I was working in corporate finance back then. Good money, stable job, but I felt like I wasn't making any real difference in the world. One day, Helen and I were walking on the beach near our house, and we saw all this trash washed up on the shore. Mostly food containers and plastic bags." Helen looked at me and said, "Robert, you're good with numbers and business. Isn't there a way to make money by solving this instead of ignoring it?" "That's amazing," Maya said. "Did you quit your job right away?" Robert laughed. "Oh no, Helen is practical too. I spent 2 years researching and planning while keeping my day job. I talked to restaurant owners, studied different materials, learned about manufacturing. When I finally took the leap, I had a solid business plan and 3 restaurants already committed to trying our products. That must have been terrifying, though, leaving a stable job to start something completely new." "Terrifying is the right word," Robert agreed, "especially since we had 2 young kids at the time. But Helen believed in the idea, and sometimes you have to trust that taking a risk is better than staying somewhere that doesn't fulfill you." Maya felt a pang of recognition. "I know that feeling. I've been unemployed for 6 months now, and part of me wonders if this is the universe telling me to try something different. But when you have bills to pay, it's hard to think about following dreams when you're worried about basic survival," Robert finished. "I understand completely." "What did you do before you started job hunting?" "I worked for a tech startup doing marketing and social media management. It was actually a great job. I love the creative side of it, coming up with campaigns and seeing how they performed. But the company ran out of funding and had to shut down suddenly." "That's rough." "Startups are exciting but unpredictable." "What kind of marketing did you focus on?" Maya's eyes brightened as she talked about her work. "Mostly digital campaigns, but I really enjoyed the storytelling aspect. Like, how do you make people care about a product or service? How do you show them that it could make their life better or solve a problem they didn't even know they had? That's exactly what we struggle with, Robert said, leaning forward with interest. Our packaging costs a little more than traditional options, so we have to help restaurants understand the long-term value, not just the environmental benefits, but how it can actually help their business. How does eco-friendly packaging help a restaurant's business? Maya asked. Well, younger customers especially are making choices based on values now. They'll choose one restaurant over another if they know the first one cares about the environment. Plus, some of our materials actually keep food fresher longer, which reduces waste and saves money. That's a really smart angle. You're not just selling packaging. You're selling a way for restaurants to connect with their customers' values while improving their bottom line. Robert's face lit up. Yes, that's exactly it. You understand marketing in a way that a lot of people don't. It's not about tricking people into buying something they don't need. It's about helping them see how what you're offering aligns with what they already want. I wish more companies thought about it that way, Maya said. The best campaigns I ever worked on were for products I actually believed in. It's so much easier to be creative when you genuinely think what you're selling will help people. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people walk by the coffee shop window. The afternoon sun was starting to set, casting a warm golden light across their table. Can I ask you something? Robert said suddenly. What you did for me today, paying for my food when you don't even know me, that's not something most people would do. Especially not someone who's been struggling financially. Maya felt a little embarrassed by the direct praise. I don't know. I guess I've been in situations where small kindnesses from strangers made a huge difference. When I first lost my job, I was at the grocery store trying to figure out how to make $15 stretch for a week's worth of food. The person behind me in line saw me putting things back and just quietly paid for my groceries. I never even got their name. That must have meant everything to you. It did. But more than that, it reminded me that even when things are hard, we can still choose to help each other. That person didn't know my story or judge whether I deserved help. They just saw someone who needed it and acted. Robert nodded slowly. I've been successful in business for a long time now, and I sometimes forget what it feels like to really need help. Today reminded me of that. Not just because of my situation, but because of how naturally you responded to it. Well, your situation was temporary. Mine feels a bit more ongoing, Maya said with a rueful smile. Temporary or not, being stranded without money or a way to contact anyone is scary. You turned what could have been a really awful day into something much better. Maya glanced at her phone and realized they'd been talking for almost an hour. I should probably head home soon. I want to get a good night's sleep before tomorrow's interview. Of course. You mentioned it's with Hartwell Industries? Yes, I've researched everything I could find about them. They seem like exactly the kind of company I'd want to work for. They care about environmental issues, they treat their employees well, and they're growing, but not so big that you'd just be a number. What position are you interviewing for? Marketing coordinator. It would involve working on campaigns for their products, managing their social media, and helping with trade shows and presentations. Basically everything I loved about my last job, but for a company with a mission I actually believe in, Robert smiled. That sounds perfect for you. Based on our conversation, I think you'd be excellent at that kind of work. I hope the interviewer sees it that way tomorrow. I'm sure they will. When is your interview? 10 in the morning. I'm planning to get there early and maybe walk around the building a bit to calm my nerves. Good strategy. Being early always makes a good impression. As they prepared to leave, Robert stood up and extended his hand. Maya, thank you again for today. I know we just met, but I have a feeling everything is going to work out well for you. Maya shook his hand, surprised by how genuinely warm and confident his grip was. Thank you, Robert. I hope you get your wallet situation sorted out and make it home safely. I'm sure I will. Good luck tomorrow. I have a really good feeling about your interview. As Maya walked toward the bus stop, she felt lighter than she had in months. Sometimes the most unexpected conversations with the most unlikely people could remind you that the world still had good in it, and that maybe, just maybe, things were about to change for the better. Maya stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 7:30 a.m., applying the last touches of makeup to cover the dark circles under her eyes. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning all night thinking about the interview. Every time she'd started to drift off, her mind would race with possible questions, potential answers, and worst-case scenarios. Her navy blue suit hung on the back of her bedroom door, freshly pressed and ready. She'd checked and double-checked that she had everything she needed: extra copies of her resume, a notebook, 2 pens, and the folder with all her research about Hartwell Industries. Her portfolio of previous marketing work was organized and ready to show examples of her campaigns. The bus ride to downtown felt longer than usual. Maya sat near a window, watching the city wake up around her. People rushed to work with coffee cups and briefcases, everyone seeming so confident and sure of their place in the world. She wondered if she'd ever feel that way again, or if the past 6 months of rejection had permanently shaken her confidence. She arrived at the Hartwell Industries building 45 minutes early, just as she'd planned. The building was modern, but not flashy, with large windows and solar panels on the roof. Even the exterior seemed to reflect the company's environmental values. Maya walked around the block twice, practicing her breathing exercises and going over her key talking points. One more time. At 9:45 she entered the lobby. The reception area was bright and welcoming, with plants everywhere and walls decorated with awards for environmental achievement and workplace excellence. A young receptionist with a warm smile greeted her. "Good morning. You must be Maya Chun, here for the marketing coordinator interview?" "Yes, that's me," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Perfect. You're nice and early, which is great. Can I get you some water or coffee while you wait?" "Water would be wonderful, thank you." Maya sat in one of the comfortable chairs, trying to look calm while her heart hammered in her chest. She reviewed her notes one last time, but the words seemed to blur together. This was it. This was her chance to turn everything around. At exactly 10 a.m., a woman in her 30s approached. "Maya, I'm Jennifer, the HR director. Ready for your interview?" "Absolutely," Maya said, standing up with what she hoped was a confident smile. Jennifer led her down a hallway lined with photos of the company's history and environmental initiatives. "You'll be meeting with our marketing manager first, then. If that goes well, our CEO likes to meet all potential hires personally. He's very hands-on with the company culture." Maya nodded, feeling a fresh wave of nerves. Meeting the CEO was both exciting and terrifying. At least she'd done her research on the company's leadership. The first interview went better than Maya had dared to hope. The marketing manager, David, was enthusiastic about her experience and asked thoughtful questions about her previous campaigns. They discussed ideas for promoting Hartwell's products, and Maya found herself getting excited about the possibilities. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again, creative, passionate, and capable. "I'm really impressed with your portfolio and your understanding of our mission," David said as they wrapped up. "I'd like you to meet with our CEO now. He makes all the final hiring decisions, but I'll definitely be giving you a strong recommendation." Maya's confidence soared. Maybe this was really happening. Maybe her luck was finally turning around. Jennifer returned to escort her to the CEO's office. "Mr. Hartwell is just finishing up a phone call, but he should be ready in just a minute," she said, leading Maya to a conference room with a large table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Take a seat anywhere you'd like. He'll be right with you." Maya chose a chair facing the door, arranging her portfolio and notes on the table. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of everything that had gone well in the first interview. She was qualified for this job. She deserved this opportunity. The door opened, and Maya looked up with a professional smile ready. Then her entire world seemed to stop. Walking through the door was Robert. The same Robert she'd bought lunch for yesterday. The same Robert who'd told her about his wife Helen and his passion for environmental packaging. The same Robert who'd wished her luck on her interview. For a moment, neither of them moved. Maya felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Robert's eyes widened in recognition, and she saw her own shock reflected back at her. "Maya," Robert said quietly, his voice carrying a mix of surprise and something else she couldn't quite identify. "You single quote, re dot dot? You're the CEO," Maya managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am." Robert closed the door behind him and walked toward the table, but instead of sitting across from her in the obvious CEO position, he took the chair next to hers. "And you're the woman who showed me incredible kindness yesterday when I was having one of the worst days I've had in years." Maya's mind was racing. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen in real life. I had no idea. "When you said you worked in packaging, I never thought." "I try not to lead with my title when I meet people," Robert said with a gentle smile. "You get more honest conversations that way? Though I have to admit, I've never had a situation quite like this before." "I'm so embarrassed," Maya said, feeling her cheeks burn. "I bought you lunch with my last $5, and you're the CEO of a company. You probably thought I was crazy or—" "Maya, stop," Robert interrupted gently. "What you did yesterday wasn't crazy. It was extraordinary. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who shows genuine kindness to a stranger without expecting anything in return? But you must think this is some kind of setup or that I knew who you were. I don't think that at all. Your surprise right now is completely genuine. Besides, you told me yesterday that you had an interview here. If you'd known who I was, don't you think you would have mentioned it?" Maya realized he was right. Yesterday she'd been completely natural, talking about her fears and hopes for this very interview. There was no way she could have faked that. "This is so surreal," she said, shaking her head. "Yesterday I was worried about impressing someone I'd never met, and it turns out I'd already met you. I'd already had dinner with you, in a way." Robert laughed, and the sound helped ease some of Maya's tension. "You did more than that. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. You showed me the kind of character we want in our employees." "What do you mean?" "Maya, I've built this company on the belief that good business comes from good people. We can teach someone about our products or our processes, but we can't teach someone to be kind, generous, or to act with integrity when they think no one important is watching." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "You were important, though. You were just someone who needed help." "Exactly. And that's what makes what you did so meaningful." Robert leaned forward slightly. "I want to conduct this interview properly because that's fair to you and to our process. But I want you to know that you've already shown me the most important thing I need to know about who you are as a person." Maya took a shaky breath. "Okay, I'd like that. A proper interview. Good, then let's start over." Robert stood up and extended his hand formally. "Miss Chun, I'm Robert Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries. Thank you for coming in today." Maya stood and shook his hand, unable to suppress a smile. "Mr. Hartwell, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm very excited about the opportunity to discuss how I might contribute to your team." As they sat back down, Maya felt something shift inside her. The crushing anxiety was still there, but underneath, it was something new, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the universe had been setting up this moment all along. The formal interview that followed was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. Robert asked all the standard questions about her background, her experience with different marketing strategies, and her vision for promoting sustainable products. But there was an underlying warmth to their conversation that made it feel more like a discussion between colleagues than a typical job interview. "Tell me about a campaign you're particularly proud of," Robert said, leaning back in his chair. With genuine interest, Maya opened her portfolio and pulled out a presentation about a campaign she'd created for a local nonprofit. This was for an organization that helped provide job training for people who'd been unemployed long-term. The challenge was that most people didn't know the organization existed, and those who needed help were often too discouraged to seek it out. "How did you approach that?" "I focused on stories rather than statistics. We created a series of short videos featuring people who'd gone through the program and found meaningful work. But instead of making it about their struggles, we focused on their dreams and ambitions. We wanted people to see possibility, not pity, Robert nodded thoughtfully. What were the results? Applications for the program increased by 200% over 6 months, and more importantly, local businesses started reaching out to offer job placement opportunities. The campaign didn't just bring in participants, it created a community of support around the organization. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need here, Robert said, making a note in his file. We're not just selling packaging materials. We're helping businesses connect with customers who care about making responsible choices. They talked for another 30 minutes about marketing strategies, company culture, and Maya's long-term career goals. Despite the surreal circumstances, Maya found herself relaxing into the conversation. This felt right. The work they were discussing excited her in a way she hadn't felt since losing her last job. Maya, I have to ask, Robert said eventually. Yesterday, when you bought me lunch, you mentioned you were down to your last few dollars. Given what that gesture cost you, why did you do it? Maya thought carefully about her answer. I guess because I know what it feels like to be in a situation where everything's going wrong and you feel invisible. When I saw you at that counter, embarrassed and trying to figure out what to do, I recognized that feeling. I've been there. And you chose to help, even though it meant sacrificing something you could barely afford to lose. It wasn't really a choice, you know? It was just the right thing to do. My grandmother used to say that kindness is the only thing that multiplies when you give it away. Robert smiled at that. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She also used to say that the universe has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time. Maya paused, realizing what she'd just said. I never really believed that until today. Neither did I, Robert admitted. But I'm starting to think she might have been onto something. They wrapped up the interview with Robert explaining the company's benefits package, growth opportunities, and team structure. Everything sounded better than Maya had dared to hope for. But she tried not to get ahead of herself. Just because they'd had an unexpected connection didn't mean she was guaranteed the job. I'll be honest with you, Maya, Robert said as they stood up to conclude the interview. We've interviewed several qualified candidates for this position. But after our conversation yesterday and again today, I'm convinced you're not just qualified. You're exactly what our team needs. Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Does that mean ... It means I'd like to offer you the position of marketing coordinator at Hartwell Industries. The salary is $65,000 to start, with full benefits and opportunity for advancement. Are you interested? Maya stared at him for a moment, hardly believing what she was hearing. 6 months of rejection, of worry, of wondering if she'd ever find work again, and now this. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I'm very interested. Excellent. Jennifer will get you set up with all the paperwork. When can you start? Tomorrow? Maya said, then laughed at her own eagerness. I mean, whenever you need me to start. Monday works perfectly. That gives you the weekend to celebrate. As they walked back toward the reception area, Robert stopped and turned to her. Maya, I want you to know that while yesterday's kindness certainly made an impression, I'm hiring you because you're talented and qualified. This job is something you've earned. Thank you, Maya said, feeling tears of relief and gratitude threatening to spill over. That means everything to me. There's one more thing, Robert added. I'd like you to meet my wife, Helen, sometime soon. I told her about yesterday, and she's convinced you're exactly the kind of person she's been telling me this company needs more of. I'd love to meet her. Jennifer appeared with a folder full of paperwork and a huge smile. Congratulations. Welcome to the Hartwell Industries family. The next hour passed in a blur of forms to fill out, direct deposit information, and scheduling for her first day. Maya kept expecting to wake up from what had to be an incredibly vivid dream. But the papers in her hands were real, and so was the relief flooding through her system. As she prepared to leave, Robert walked her to the elevator. Maya, can I ask you one last question? Of course. Yesterday, when you bought my lunch, what were you planning to eat for dinner? Maya felt her cheeks redden. I had some ramen noodles at home. Robert shook his head in amazement. You spent your food money on a stranger. It worked out okay, Maya said with a smile. It worked out better than okay. It changed both our lives. On the bus ride home, Maya called her parents with the news. Her mother cried. Her father kept asking if she was sure it was real. She called her best friend Lisa, who screamed so loud that other passengers turned to look. Maya didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. That evening, Maya walked back to the coffee shop where everything had started. Mrs. Chun smiled when she saw her come through the door. You look different today, Mrs. Chun observed. Happy. I got the job, Maya said simply. The interview you were worried about? That's wonderful. Maya ordered a large coffee and a sandwich, a real sandwich, not just the cheapest thing on the menu. As she sat in the same booth where she'd spent so many anxious hours, she thought about her grandmother's words about kindness multiplying and the universe bringing people together. 6 months later, Maya was thriving in her new role. She'd implemented a community outreach program that connected Hartwell Industries with local nonprofits, helping them switch to eco-friendly packaging at reduced costs. The program had been Robert's idea, inspired by their first conversation about giving back. To the community, Maya never forgot the lesson of that day in the coffee shop. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Sometimes the worst days lead to the best opportunities. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to help a stranger, you end up helping yourself in ways you never could have. Imagined, she kept her grandmother's photo on her desk at work, right next to a framed quote that Robert had given her on her first day. Kindness is the only thing that multiplies when you give it away. It served as a daily reminder that the best things in life often come when you're not looking for them, but when you're busy taking care of others.